I think that I had to come to the realization of why I was there, right? Why do I keep getting out and going back and getting out and going back? I did 8.5 out of 10 from 17 to 27. I did 8.5 behind bars. And that stretch there was the longest, from about 21 to 27. That's when I was in. And I realized that it was that I didn't like the guy that I was seeing in the mirror. I didn't like me. And I went through a lot, I had a lot of coping mechanisms that I'd picked up along the way. I had a lot of defense mechanisms, aggression, anger, violence. These things helped me, right? And I had to figure out that, these things were probably not going to help me on the outside. And I made a list of the things that I didn't like. I made a list.
My friend, welcome. You are so important. You matter. Our world is in desperate need of men like you who are stepping into their role as fathers. 3 things that hit me from my conversation with my friend Lane Williams today are: number 1, you have the power to change your family's trajectory. Number 2, being a good man means impacting the next generation. And 3, your past does not define your future. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast, where I interview incredible fathers, gaining wisdom from their stories for you and I to grow in our craft. I'm your guide, Ned Shout, father to 5 kiddos, currently ages 11 to 18, and husband to my rad wife, Sarah, working on our 21st year of marriage. So yeah, my friend, I'm in the thick of it, and I am working daily to rebel against the low expectations for fathers and create a world where fathers know who they are as they show up for their families. You and I have the greatest opportunity to impact our world through the way we embrace our fatherhood role. This episode is brought to you by the Adventure of Fatherhood, helping men discover their powerful fatherhood role and build their fatherhood skills. The role of the father is to serve, guide, steward, provide, protect, and of course, find joy and have fun in the messiness of it all. Today's guest is my friend Lane Williams. We get a glimpse into his life and story. This man has overcome so much to be where he is today. This conversation is powerful and captivating. All right, my friends, welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes. So pumped to be connecting with a friend of mine today, Lane. Lane, welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling today?
Excited, man. Thanks for having me, brother.
Oh, dude, when I saw that you and I are meeting today, I just got a smile on my face, and I'm just going to go straight to the core here of you and I were at a Rise Up Kings event, and there was this share moment, right? There's this share moment. There's a couple hundred men in the room, and you could share, like, stand up and say what's something you got out of the event. And what I recall, this is about a year ago, is you stood up and you said, that you came to some clarity around your story, and you were looking forward to an opportunity for God to use you to share your story. And bro, it was like fire, because at that moment, Skylar Lewis, leader of Rise Up Kings, was like, let's go, baby. Let's go right now. Come on stage. And like, that was not what you were meaning. That is not what you were looking for. But it was like, game on, bro. So tell me about that moment of, getting on stage and starting to open up with your story. Like, what did that do for your heart, your mind, your soul? Like, fast forward to today. What has that been like the last year to start to open up about that?
First off, I'll say that space, regardless of having 200 men in the room or not, was a very safe space.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the connection that we have as brothers in Rise Up Kings, just it makes things like that happen. It seems like God just steps in the room and says, "Nope, this is what's going down." And and I'd felt called on by God to start sharing some of my story. And so during that share moment, I said, within the next year, I am going to get in front of a group of men and I'm going to tell my story. And I said the next year, and Skylar was like, well, let's go, buddy. And I was like, no, it's cool. In the next year. And Skylar's like, nope, come on. And I'll say that, yeah, there was that, endorphin rush and, is this really what's happening? And when I got on stage, Skylar kind of pulled me to the side and said, it's a God thing.
Hmm.
And it just calmed me. It turned the volume down a little bit. And I thought, okay, God, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, not for me, but maybe there's somebody in the room that needs to hear this. And I was able to really kind of just start from a childhood thing and give about a 5-minute elevator speech of my story. And what's neat is my wife said she felt like she was there with a celebrity for the rest of the time we were there. Everywhere
Mm.
we went, man, somebody was like, man, thank you for this thing that you said. And thank you for being vulnerable, because it gives me that opportunity to think that it's okay to be vulnerable. And so, yeah, that situation was powerful for me.
Was your wife in the room when you got up and shared?
She was not.
Hmm. Hmm.
She was at Rise Up Queens.
Got it. Yeah. So she's in the other room. Well, Lane, I'm sure we're going to get into your story some, and I'm just so grateful. Like as I sat in the back of the room and I heard you share, I was like, the vulnerability, the transparency, the openness and honesty, like men need this. And I sent a little note to myself saying, I'd love to get Lane on the podcast. And again, so before we hit record today, my intention is never like, let me find out some crazy story, to get, because people get wrapped up in that. But this idea of redemption. And so before we hit record, I kind of, talk to you about what we were going to talk about. And the thing that you said to me, which I think is really important for every man to hear as we step into your story and step into like getting to know you a bit more, is you said, if somebody's really going to know me, they need to know all of me. Like I'm going to go deep with them, and they're going to know where I came from and why I am the way I am, like why, and not as a like, well, I'm this way because of X, but like God has done things in my life, and there are pieces of my story that are significantly hard, but it doesn't necessarily define the Lane today, but it will help you know who I am if you know where I come from. I think it's really important, men listening. It doesn't matter like if your story's like you grew up, and you landed in prison, or you grew up and you were a religious snob. People need to know your story, and it's not just good for them, it's good for you to be open, because we all want to be known, and still be loved and accepted. Any thoughts on me saying that, like as you have allowed yourself to open up and be more known, what has it done for your soul?
Well, it makes it easier, right? Like lying is the harder path,
Mm.
right? Just being open and honest, you don't have to track what your lies are, or did I tell
uh
this person that? So for me, being open and honest about who I am, it gives that clarity, right, in a relationship. But it allows me to be me. I don't have to try and be someone else. I don't have to
mm.
try and meet other people's expectations. I can just say, hey, this is who I am. And now, obviously, with employees, I don't share my story 110% with employees or people at the grocery store, let's say, unless I felt compelled to have a conversation with some guy at the gas station.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a depth of relationship with another individual, when I get to that point where I think that we're taking that next step, it's always important for me to let them know who I am, or to let them know where. And again, like you said, my past doesn't define my future, but it's a part of who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
let me take a step back and ask a couple like foundation questions here, and then we'll go from there. How old do you find yourself today?
47 years old.
47. How many years you been married?
18.
Nice, bro. And how many kids do you have? Like, what's the age range on the kids?
So I have a son. When I was 14, I got a girl pregnant. I haven't seen him since he was 3. So I guess that would put him at about 33 years old. I have 2 daughters that my wife had from a previous marriage that I raised. And then we have a 16-year-old son together.
Love it. Got it, man. Yes, there's some history there. Where do you guys live?
We live in Leander, Texas, which is about 17 miles north of Austin, somewhere in there.
Okay. And then what do you do for a living to provide value out in the world and provide for the family?
Yeah, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I During COVID, I started 3 companies. I get bored. I didn't say I started successful companies, but I started companies. I currently own 15% of an oil and gas production company, and I just bought a franchise in HVAC and plumbing. I also wheel and deal on the side with water treatment, water filtration, things of that
Okay.
nature. So
Okay. And then when did you embrace fatherhood? When did you go, fatherhood matters, right? Because you became a father young, and then you became a stepfather, and then you had another child later in life. So at what point did you go, wow, fatherhood is a big deal and I want to lean into it?
So I think I was probably about 22 years old and I was sitting in prison.
Hmm.
And, you get a little bit of a time to reflect on life at that point. And I decided that I wanted to be a dad. I decided that I wanted to raise a good man because I always
Hmm.
wanted to be a good man. I had examples of good men and bad men throughout my life. And I decided that I wanted to raise a son to be just like a solid dude.
Hmm.
And so that's whenever that I decided, right, I want to do this. And it took a while. Obviously, I think my son was born when I was 27 or 28. The 2 girls, we had been married for about a year whenever that my wife got pregnant with my son. And we can cover the stepdad thing a little bit more in depth later, but you know, that was a tough one for me to be a stepdad to the girls, just because I had so many bad stepdads and I didn't
Hmm.
want to be that guy. And it may have made it, kind of hard for me, put a little block in there. But from the start, I always tried to be a good dad to them. So I think that was really when I was about 22. I decided I'm going to do this thing, and if
Yeah.
I'm remembered for anything, it's going to be as a good dad.
Ah, so at 22 years old, you're in prison. You have this moment of like, wow, I want to be a good man. And what I love about this is it wasn't just about you. You realize, like, if I want to be a good man, there you how did you connect that to not just I'm going to get my shit together and I'm going to come out and go grow businesses and me. You tied it to be a good man, I need to raise a good man. Talk to me about that connection.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, Mondo kind of stole my thunder on the whole Jonathan Edwards and
Mm,
Jukes. I ran across that somewhere along the way, and there's this legacy in my family, at least, of on my mom's side, of just dysfunction and these generational curses. And I just decided that wasn't gonna happen. Right?
mm,
I'm done. It's stopping here. It's not gonna continue. Right? There's gonna be a fork in the road. And if my family continues down that road, that's fine. But there's going to be a fork where my legacy changes, and my descendants are going to be different. And I felt like it wasn't, and obviously I had a lot of work to do on me, but it wasn't just me fixing me or God fixing me that was going to make that difference. I was going to have a son. I was going to have children. I was going to have to leave something.
mm.
And I think that was the motivation, right? We're going to change this thing. We're going to right the ship, and my descendants are going to be different.
Dude, I love this, Lane. I think this is so powerful because as men, especially in our culture, I think we think about the business we're going to leave or the legacy we're going to leave financially or like what we're going to build in this lifetime. And you connected this to me being a good man is about my descendants. It's about what does my family tree look like after I'm gone? And
Absolutely.
ah, I love this. And maybe some of that was because you felt like which this is kind of cool. You felt like you said my mother's side, it was just like generational curses, this baggage and trauma and shit over and over. But to peel away from that, you thought the way to peel away from this, I'm like a linchpin between future generations, and future generations aren't going to be 22 sitting in a prison because of the work I'm going to do in this lifetime. And I would
Absolutely.
say, I mean, is that the thing that carried you from 22 to then you said you had your son at around 27, 28?
Yeah, I think I was 28. Well, 29, 29. Let's
Okay,
kick that
29.
off because I got out of prison when I was 27. So I had another, about 5 years in there to really start working on me.
Mm.
And yes, that was a lot. I knew what his name was going to be.
Oh,
I
really?
knew, oh man, I picked
Oh,
like this is it.
what's his
This is
name?
what we're going to do. This is the goal, right? We're setting this long-term goal, and I'm
Wow.
going to do my best to build this well-adjusted, good man. And guess what? I got two girls out of the deal too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What's your son's name?
So his name is French Lane Williams II. He's named after my dad. French is a family name. My grandfather was named French Beard. His dad was named French. So that was passed down. I didn't get the French, but
Mm.
we call him Deuce because he's the second. So French Lane Williams II,
Oh
named
my
after my
goodness.
dad.
So your son's named after your dad, or you knew you were going to name him after your dad. What was your relationship like with your dad at this moment? So you decide to change things. I'm going to have a son. His name's going to be French. You must have had some kind of relationship with your dad.
Yeah, very superficially.
Okay.
So there was huge turmoil when we were kids with the custody battle between my mom and my dad. They were married, they got divorced, they got married again, they got divorced again.
Mm,
And all of that, they poisoned my mind against my dad, even though my dad
mm,
was a good guy, but my mom's side of the family was not. And in the 80s in Texas, they're not going to give a dad custody.
mm-hmm,
It just wasn't going to happen. My dad fought and fought and fought for us. And then he finally got married to another lady who's a wonderful woman, and they had another family, and he had to make a decision to not have dysfunction and not have this madness affect his current family. And so he had to pretty much walk away from us at a certain
wow.
point,
Wow.
from me and my sister. And so at that point, I'd been hearing stories about him. He's a tough guy, man. He was right. I went to the same high school for a couple of years, and I was hearing stories about my dad beating people up
Wow.
from my the people that I went to school with, their parents. But he was a
Wow.
good dude. He was just tough, man. He just liked to fight, and so I always looked up to him. I always wanted to be
Mm,
tough, right? But it was more the family name.
mm.
Right. It was, yeah, I named my son after my dad, but I more gave him a family name than I gave him my dad's name, if that makes sense. And nothing against my dad. Obviously, that's not the point. Just that French was a family name, Lane was a family name, and I wanted him to have that name.
Well, dude, now this ties it together even better. I mean, not better, but more clearly. This wasn't about necessarily, yeah, Matt, he's your dad. We're always going to have a love and desire for our dad. But as you're making this shift in the fork in the road, now French Lane Williams, three family names are going to mean something drastically different. Right? Like if the goal would be if somebody goes to your kid's high school in 30 years, that when they talk about Deuce, other things are talked about than just like he beat people up or there's dysfunction or there's
Right.
this stuff, right? So you are just straight up taking the family name and saying, nope, it doesn't mean everything it's meant for the last, couple hundred years. This is what it means from this day forward. So love that. So as you're in prison, 22 to 28, what did you have to do? Like, how did you prepare yourself to go, I'm going to be the man that can welcome a little human into the world, and I'm going to be there for that kid? What did that 5-year period look like?
Um. Well, first off, I I think that I had to come to the realization of why I was there, right? Why do I
Mm.
keep getting out and going back and getting out and
Mm-hmm.
going back? I did 8.5 out of 10 from 17 to 27. I did 8.5 behind bars.
Wow.
And that stretch there was the longest, from about 21 to 27. That's when I was in. And I realized that it was that I didn't like the guy that I was seeing in the mirror.
Mm.
I didn't like me. And I went through a lot, I had a lot of coping mechanisms that I'd picked up along the way. I had a lot of defense mechanisms, aggression, anger, violence. These things helped me, right? And I had to figure out that, these things were probably not going to help me on the outside. And
Mm-hmm.
I made a list of the
Mm.
things that I didn't like. I made a list.
Wow.
I
Okay.
wrote it down on paper and I just started working on it. I just started working on the list. I'm like, I don't like this about me. I don't like that about me. And I could make a list today again about more things that I don't like. So
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I fixed
Yeah.
everything,
Right. Right.
But at that point, I made the list and I said, these are the things that I don't like. And I set about working to change those things.
Hmm.
And at a certain point, I realized that I did like the guy that I was. I liked the man that I saw in the mirror. And that was it was a process. Yeah.
Dude, what a beautiful process. And I mean, on one hand, it feels like, oh, that'd be easy. You're at, jail, prison. You can start to work on these things. But then there's this massive shift I would assume you have to make where you have to show up, one day you're showing up one way and another day you start showing up another day. Seems like that'd be kind of difficult to do in that position. Am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, those things that I had to change were internal. The externals
Mm,
couldn't change. So I was on what's considered a gladiator farm. I'd
okay.
had multiple violent offenses, and that follows you. And I was under 25, and so in Texas, if you're under 25 and you've got a violent record, they just kind of throw you all in this medium max security uh, gladiator school, right? And you're there and they don't, if somebody's stabbing somebody, they're not going to save them. They're just going to wait till it's over and then they'll come in and get the person that lost. They might hit you with CS gas or something along those lines. And I won't get too deep in, but yeah, that's, so I had a thing, we called it keeping our armor shiny. And so
Mm,
you keep your armor shiny by working out, keeping yourself in a certain physical, you know, uh, you keep your armor shiny, I guess, for lack of a better sense, right? You keep the six pack, the arms, the shoulders, and you never put your shirt on until after you step out of your cell, so that everybody can look and see if they're looking for somebody that day to steal from or to rape or to jump on or whatever. They look down and they see you, and then they see this slightly softer, maybe nervous looking kid next to you, and then they don't want to mess with you, right? They want the easy
wild.
meat.
Wild.
And so I had to continue, even though these internal changes were happening. They showed themselves in different ways, right? I didn't look for the things that I looked for before, but I still had to carry myself in a certain aggressive way. And some of our brothers I've spoken to have been in the same situation as me, and they understand, right? As much as I want to be a better guy in there, in some instances, you can't give the appearance of weakness in any way,
Hmm.
right? Not in that environment.
So as you did the internal work and you had to keep this aggressive, like, protection, shiny armor, when you got out, how were you able to make the shift from, and are maybe still making the shift from, you know uh shiny armor to, like, the internal work is now showing up in the external lane?
Yeah, that took a while. Um, Again, you build these defense mechanisms, and there was a time I remember within a couple of months of being out that there was some poor guy just turning his truck around, And I was in the road waiting on him to turn his truck around. And as he was turning, doing a 3-point turn, he made eye contact with me. And brother, it set me off. Like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
looking at? Why are you looking? That's something that, man, that's aggressive behavior right there. And it wasn't. He was just turning his truck around. So, it took a while for me to change, even though I had there was a shift. I remember seeing homeless people on the road, and I think, man, they need to get a job. And then one day I noticed myself praying for them, right? God,
Mm.
find a way to help them today, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
something to bless this person. And that's, that internal, it was expressing itself more outward, more open, the way that I would talk with people, smile at people at the grocery store, just things like that. It takes a while, because
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm making these internal changes and I'm changing these things about me, what I'm on the inside, but I've got years of defense mechanisms to overcome when I got out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about where to go with unpacking some of your past, and I think this is where I'd like to ask the question: having a son now that is in the process of becoming a man, as you're walking with him to become a man, uh, I want to start with like 2 or 3 milestones from your childhood, say from being born to, age 22, or, 18, 19, 20, whatever. What are 2 or 3 milestone things that you're like, I want my son to know these and understand these things about me that are going to help him as he becomes a man in the future? Like, what stories are relevant, do you think, that you feel like your son needs to know and understand about you?
I think there's been some times when, because I think it's a heart issue too, right? Even though I was
Mm,
raised rough, I had some good examples of, like, my uncle Mark.
hmm.
He
Yeah.
was a minister, and he was a strong man, and he was a good example for me, right? And then I had my other uncle that was, shootouts and stabbing people and killing people and all these things.
And
And
these are things that you witnessed, right?
yeah, I saw my uncle Randy, who he's passed now, so it's. But I saw him stab a guy in the neck when I was about 9. I remember the vivid thing that I remember about it was that he had just, so he was a meth cook and he had gotten paid a bunch of money, and he had just bought these brand new white elephant skin boots, and he was so proud of them.
Mm.
And then he goes and stabs this guy in the neck and gets blood all over the boots, and he's got to paint them black. Right. That's the vivid thing that I remember about that guy. So,
Wild.
in the middle of that, I've got this great uncle and I've got this bad uncle. And one of the things that I would remember that when you asked about a milestone,
Hmm. Hmm.
I remember that it's a heart thing, right? Yeah, I was raised rough, and I was raised to listen, robbery, burglary, assaults, you name it, right? I was not a very good guy, but I remember there was this old man that was really, really drunk, and he had parked his car on the side of the road, and me and this other guy were walking, and we found this old man, and there's no street lights, and he's just got gold chains and necklaces, and he's in this Cadillac, and I just, it was a perfect lick, right? We're fixing to get paid, you know,
Hmm.
and I just wouldn't let it happen. I just said, no, this is just not, we're not going to do it, right? This is just something that we're not going to do. And, whether that was God stepping in and, because most of the time, I explained it one time. There was a buddy of mine that he's passed on now. He got in a shootout with the cops and he got killed. And he had this thing about, he was talking about, an incident. And I told him, I said that the difference is, if you're out and you're a bear and you're fighting with another bear and that bear gets killed versus you killing if you're a bear and you kill a baby, a fawn or something, right?
Hmm.
If you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and there's tough stuff that happens. but someone that's a non-combatant, let's say, someone that's not on the streets, someone that's not
Mm-hmm.
in the game, right? Those people, you know, sometimes even as a bad guy, I felt like I needed to protect them, right? I need to, you
Hmm.
just can't step over a line. And maybe that was God saying, there's this one piece of lane that I got to preserve, right? And
Mm.
we're not gonna do that, you know. So that's just that one I definitely bring up.
How old are you
Um,
on that milestone moment?
I would say, you know, my son knows that I've had some tough stuff in my past, and you know, I've never really brought up any of the other stuff as far
Yeah.
as my mom, and I don't know where we go with that, but she was uh, she was a drug addict. She was a stripper. She was a bartender. She would always date the drug dealers if she could, because then she would get drugs. And she was gorgeous. She was in Hustler magazine and Gallery magazine.
Mm.
My mom was beautiful, but she was a very bad person. And uh, you know, she some of the stuff I tell my son, like, never make fun of those kids, right? If you see a kid that doesn't have
Mm.
nice shoes or nice clothes, because that's your dad that you're making fun of, right? And
Damn.
I remember
Wow.
my grandmother buying me school clothes, and my mom taking all my school clothes and selling them to the dope man. And then I saw his kid at school wearing my clothes that I picked out, right? So I beat him up. You know, the poor kid, it's not his fault. But yeah, that killed me, man. You know,
That's
like
heavy.
this lady, you know. So that for me, that was an adjustment. And I think honestly, that's one of the reasons why my son, I'll give you this. When there was the Afghanistan, you know, whenever that we left Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of families that had supported the Americans for years and years and years, and they had to get out. And 100 families were actually brought to Austin, and our church was very involved in trying to help them. And I took my son, and he never complained one time. And I told him when we saw those people that had nothing, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And we were delivering clothes and furniture, and he, man, my boy was right there with me. If I said, "Hey, we're gonna go do this thing," he's like, "All right, Dad, let's go."
Hmm.
Um, but I told him, I said, "That was me, bud. Right? You see that kid over there with no shoes? I didn't get shoes in the summertime. Ned, they couldn't afford shoes in the summertime for me, right? So I get shoes during school, and I'd run
Mm.
around barefoot in the summertime because we were poor, man. We were poor. But I'd tell my son, man, that's me, you know. And so I know that's a milestone for me, was not just, you know, knowing that I was the kid that didn't have clothes, but then we were in a position that me and my son
Yeah.
could go and help other people that didn't have clothes, like where I was in life. So
Mm.
that was powerful for me.
And yeah, brother, the way that you shared that, like, that's perfect, right? That milestone moment where it's not the typical, like, oh, you should be lucky for those Nikes now because your dad didn't have shit when he was a kid. That's not and again, you're talking about the heart behind things. You're like, son, when you make fun of that kid, you are making fun of me. Like, holy smokes, that's heavy, bro, right? Because
Mhm.
when you see this kid you don't know, so like you're teaching him, but then you're creating opportunities and space to go, like, I mean, dude, clearly you're successful with your businesses. Your son could probably have whatever shoes he wants for the most part. So you're tying this, like, we don't have wealth because we deserve it necessarily. Like, dad worked to make this happen. And we're choosing down a generational path of blessing, of
Mm,
bringing life, not of chaos and destruction.
yeah. Well, don't get me wrong though, man. I still, when he's upset about something, I'm still like, what do you got to
Well,
be upset about, man? You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And that's not
yeah.
fair to him,
Mm.
you
But see,
know?
you recognize it, and we're all on a
Yeah.
path of growth, right?
Yeah.
So dude, those are two phenomenal. Any other kind of, like, things that you maybe find yourself bringing up to your son, like, hey son, I know your worldview is this, and that's good, but the reason it's this is because dad has seen another side. Is there any other those kinds of moments where you find yourself reflecting and teaching your son?
You know, we've talked quite a bit, you know, about all that, and I think, you know, as crazy as it sounds, it's just the simple things like food, like having
Mm,
food when you grow up and you don't have food. Um, you know, just getting him to be comfortable with what we have, right?
mm,
And the girls, like I feel bad. We didn't have money when we had the girls, and then you know, so then he's in a position where he's always been able, like, if we want to go out to eat, we go out to eat. If you want to go buy a
mhm,
steak, you go buy a steak. If you want shoes, you go get shoes, right? But I think food, there's like that, you know, you've heard it before, food insecurity, right? Food insecurity.
mhm,
You've heard people talk about this, but yeah, you know, not having food and then walking in my grandmother's house and she's got a dry storage just with food from one end to the other. You know, it was like you hear the angels singing and you're like, wow, you know, oh, it's something else. So I don't know, just appreciating the little things, right? And I
mhm.
think that he's always done that. I think, you know, he's never complained, man. We're selling our house and we remodeling another small house and we're living in an RV. And this kid had a suite upstairs, right? He had the gym and the theater room and his bedroom. And now three of us and three dogs are living in an RV. No complaints, right?
Mm,
Just he's like, all right, Dad, it's cool, man. Whatever we got to do, let's do it. You know what I mean?
mm.
So, yeah,
I love that. I wanted to ask you, you know, in the pre-show notes, you answered a question and you said you wanted to embrace King David's example. And you said three things. You said repent, accept forgiveness, and strive to get, you know, 0.5% better every day. Talk to me about repent, accept forgiveness, like accepting it, because like you don't seem like you live with shame or guilt from the past, but you're taking the reality of what happened in the past and letting it inform the man that Lane is today. Talk to me about that. How do you do that?
right. Well, that's probably the hardest thing that I had to learn when I was going through my list of things that I didn't like about me.
Mm,
You know, I think the one, and this is what led me to, when I got out of prison, I joined a volunteer fire department and I did 3 years of that. I did hot shot work, search and rescue in Big Bend National Park, canyon rescue. I trained for as much as I could because I felt like I had taken and taken and taken from my
uh,
community, right? And I wanted
hmm,
to give some back. So that was one of the hardest things is, you know, accepting that I had done a lot of bad stuff. I'd hurt a lot of people, and then, you know, repenting and saying, God, you know, these things that I did. And I couldn't just say, you know, yeah, you know, 1995, it was a rough year, man. I did a lot. You know, you had to, I mean, personally, I had to say, this day, this thing that I can remember, this thing that I can
hmm,
remember, this person that I hurt, I had to look at those things head on, take them to God, and ask for forgiveness, right? So then that's the easy part. All right, God, I did
mm,
these
mm,
things. Now, when I believe that Jesus came and died for me and he paid the price for my sins, right? So I'm forgiven. The hard part for me and for I'm sure a lot of people is accepting that forgiveness,
yeah.
right? Accepting that forgiveness. And then when I find myself doing the same thing that I just asked for forgiveness, that's where David comes in. David, man, he was a dude, right? If you want to talk
Yeah.
about, you know, and I'm not down talking to anybody, but we all know the youth pastor with the spiky bleached hair and yo, bro, that guy, right? We need a lot more dudes in the church, if you ask me, right? We need a lot more straight up men.
Hmm.
And I'll say this to the end, but if somebody disrespects my wife, I'm gonna have words, and me and Jesus can talk about it later. right? King David was a dude, right?
Yeah.
But he would drop to his knees and he would
Mm.
ask for forgiveness and he would accept that forgiveness and he would say, God, you said this thing, right? And he would accept that. And then so that's the challenge for me, obviously, is to continue to drop to my knees and continue to say, Lord, forgive me, and to accept that forgiveness. And it gets easier. It really does. Like, listen, if I'm not asking forgiveness for some horrendous thing that I did, but maybe just because I popped off to somebody, it's a lot easier, now that we've got the volume turned down. And I'm not asking for, hey, listen, I cracked this dude over the head yesterday, right?
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
it's, I said a mean word.
Right. It's toned down. But dude, I kind of want to lean into something and have guys ponder this for themselves. Now, I'm not justifying or saying that we should only work on internal things, like go back to the prison days. I'm not saying just work on the inside and keep yourself your armor shiny, like, because you have to be ready to freaking throw down at every second of the day. However, I will say that I feel as though a lot of Christian men or men who are like doing the internal work become straight up bitches on the outside.
Yeah,
And it's like, hang on a second. Hang on. I love what you said. Like, if somebody's going to disrespect my wife, I'm gonna have some words, and then me and Jesus will talk about it later. And bringing up the King David's a dude. Us men can do work on the inside. It doesn't mean that our armor shouldn't be shiny on the outside. That we still, because here's the thing, right? David messed up. We don't want to mess up like he did. But he would fall to his knees. So I think that we disconnect the shiny armor and the guy who can fall to his knees and surrender to God. Like, both those guys can coexist inside you and I.
absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you still be that guy today without it being like, I guess you said it, like, I didn't crack somebody over their head yesterday. I might have just like yelled at him or something. I don't know. How do you live that guy out today?
Well, but that's still, it doesn't give me a pass to yell at a guy either,
It's
right?
true.
You know,
Yes. Okay.
so and the challenge is to that 5%, man, that 1%, building those
Mm-hmm,
habits,
mm-hmm.
right? Today I might get mad at somebody in traffic, and tomorrow I might let them pass, right? Yeah, I I'm moving more towards that godlike life, and I'm failing miserably every day, right? But I'm getting back up tomorrow, right? And I'm saying, here we go again, God. It's going to be a great day. Help to show me what your will is today and give me the strength to carry that will out, right? That's my daily prayer, right? Open my eyes and my ears. Let me hear and see
Yeah.
what it is that you would have for me to do today and give me the strength to carry that out, right? So, yeah, the whole, man, I'll tell you a good story, man. I was in a county jail and I decided that I was going to be a Christian. And listen, man, I had just gone through a phase. I was in a pod that they called the Thunderdome, right? And you can guess, like, two men enter, one man leave. Like, it was rowdy. I had poured the water in multiple TVs. They had a TV in there, and if somebody argued with me about what we were going to watch on TV, I would just get a glass of water and pour it in the TV, right? And if I'm not watching what I want to watch, nobody's watching it, right? And
That's
obviously I
wild.
would get the crap beat out of me by some of these dudes, right? But
Right.
I'm on a pill. I got a 15-year sentence, and I'll be damned if the
Mm.
guy that's coming in because he got drunk at the bar and he's going to be there for one night's going to tell me what I'm going to watch on TV. You got me messed up, bro, right? And so I'm in the Thunderdome. We're getting in riots. I'm burning stuff down. I made the newspaper a couple of times, Ned. Okay. So I went from that to saying, I want to be a Christian, right?
Hmm.
And so I felt compelled. I read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John on my knees 3 times within 30 days.
Mm.
Every time I was reading, I was on my knees and I read the Gospels and I read it 3 times within 30 days. And I felt like I needed to be this different person, right? And this was
Hmm.
my transition. And the pendulum swings, right? Really hard one way and then really hard another. So there was this guy named Red. He was a big old guy from like Wisconsin or something. And bro, he could not have whooped me. at all, right? But he bullied me, and I let him bully me
Hmm.
because I was trying to be this. I will turn the other cheek. I was doing what I thought was the right thing, right?
Hmm.
And I lost face, and people looked down on me, and I
Hmm.
started living in this anxiety and in this fear, and I said, and man, it was just like I get it. If the guy was 6'6", 275, and a monster, right? Anybody's gonna be scared of that guy. But this dude could not whoop me, you know. And I still let him bully me, but it was because I thought that was the Christian thing to do, right? And
Hmm.
I shucked it off and I said, that's it. And bro, this is something I've never shared with you or with I became a Satanist after that, right?
Wow.
Because I read the book and it said, do what thou will, right? That's the whole of the law. And it was about strength and about power. And I'm not going to
Hmm.
let anybody tell me what to do, right? I ran across a guy. I was in Austin and I was on parole and I went to the parole office and I ran across a guy that was a younger guy that kind of was locked up with me. And I told him I was married and he stopped and it was powerful for me. He stopped and he was like, does she know who you are? Right? Does my
Wow.
wife know who I am? I said, yeah, she knows who I am. But I didn't think about it like the man that I was in there. I wasn't Lane. I was Rooster. That was my nobody. You got a street name, and I was the
Yeah.
Rooster, right? And I was the Rooster, and I didn't tell my son the story. And I know stop me if you want to interject, but
No.
I didn't tell my son the story. But it was because somebody pulled a knife on me one time when I was in there, and it was just a homemade piece of crap. And I got stabbed twice when I was inside. So I said, man, I said, what is that? Right. I said, if you stab me with that, it's going to hurt, but I'm not going to die and I'm going to mess you up, dude. Right. I just flat out told him. And so then they started making fun of me saying, oh, he ain't going to die. And so I was the Rooster from then on. So this
Hmm.
guy that I met in Austin, he didn't know me. He knew the Rooster. Right.
Hmm.
That's who he knew. And I told him, yeah, she knows me, right? But she probably doesn't, right? No, nobody that wasn't locked up with me, they don't know the Rooster. And so, anyways, I went from Christianity hardcore one way, and I swung the pendulum all the way back to Satanism because I wanted to be in power and I wasn't going to let anybody bully me. And I don't care what you can kick me in the face when I'm down, and I'm not going to give up. And so that was just,
So
it
tell
was a
me,
pendulum.
yeah. So tell me this, because I think that your perspective is really important for men, right? It's on the extreme side. But as a Christian man, what does it look like, right? To not go from being to, you don't want to be bullied. You don't want to be the Satanist who is just focused on power. But what does it mean to be a King David? Does King David get bullied, or does it depend on the moment? Does it depend on the circumstances? As a Christian man today, what's your perspective that you would share? Right. So say your son comes to you, and maybe this is a good example or not, and he's getting bullied at school. Now, you and I both know as dads, like the kid who's doing the bullying is the Lane who has a shit circumstances at home. Right. We
Mm-hmm.
know that. But as a Christian man, how do you show up to that? What's your perspective on that all these years later?
I told my son that and I'm sure you've heard a variation of this before, but when he was little, he got in a couple of fights, and I told him, I said that, man, I said, we're not the bad guys, right? We're the good guys.
Mm,
I said,
mm,
Spider-Man, Iron Man, they fight, right?
yep,
But they
yep.
fight for people that are weaker than them. And so I told him that we're not going to be sheep and we're not
Hmm.
going to be wolves, but we're going to be sheepdogs, right?
Yeah.
And that old, there's a million cliches out there, right? The only thing that needs to happen for bad men to prevail is for good men to do nothing, right? There's a
Hmm.
lot of them out there, right? And so yeah, I've told my son that, and that's the thing is that, man, I think my son's got such a compassionate heart, right?
Mm.
But if he got bullied, I would tell him, just go ahead and punch him in the mouth, man. Just get it over with, right? Is that the right or the Christian thing to do? No, man, it's not. You're right, but I think that he's got a right to protect himself and to protect his mom and to protect his sisters. And if if that situation arises, right? Like again, what's worse, right? Is complacency. There's an OG from
Mm,
my church, and he told me that that's the worst thing that we can. That's the
mm,
opposite of love, right? We can
mm.
be complacent towards another human. I don't care if you live or die. I don't care if you're on fire. I don't hate that person. I don't even give them enough of my emotions to hate them,
Wow.
right? That's the worst. So what can we
Hmm.
do? Man, there's a guy that would let's say he disrespects my wife or puts hands on her or something. I'm going to beat the brakes off of him, right? But I'm not going to hate him, right? I'm
uh,
not going to be complacent about the guy. I'll probably feel bad for him, man, and I'll probably say a prayer for the dude, right? So I think that the Christian answer is that we're men, right? But we've got to know where do we approach that situation in our heart,
hmm
right?
hmm
My uncle's a minister, but if you break into his home, he's gonna put some lead in you, bro. Right? He's gonna let you know. He's gonna protect his family, right? Would he pray for you as you were dying? Would he say, "Hey,
I
listen"?
love
I'm
it.
serious, man. He would.
Yeah, I
He
know.
would be right there
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, listen, I need you to repeat this after me right now as you're dying, right? Hey,
So good.
let Jesus into your heart," right? He would do that right after putting some lead in the dude, right? Right? So is that the balance? I don't know, man.
Yeah, but I love the wrestle, right? And you're right. Like it isn't black and white. It isn't black and white. And you said it a couple times in our conversation. It's a heart issue, and even the heart issue is like we're not going to get it right every time. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the point of this life. Is this like wrestling with who God made me to be? And the fight thing is interesting because I got bullied in new school, 7th grade, and my did everything. Go to the principal, go to the teachers. My mom did everything. Um, and she finally told me one day, Ned, as soon as you get the chance, you just sock him in the face.
Yeah.
Just sock him in the face. And what's wild is from that point on, like I was friends with those guys, right? It's just part of how we're made. So I had a unique experience that I was able to then share with my son and my kids as they've kind of come across those things. And I don't think enough fathers are having that conversation with their sons these days. And at dads, I think it's really important to be engaged. I'm not saying tell your kid to go punch somebody in the face, but be
Right.
engaged because, dude, I went to my son got in trouble at school for hitting a kid because the kid was bullying his twin sister. And, dude, thank God I showed up to the school because I was in the room with my son, his female teacher, his female lunch lady, and his female principal. And they're telling him next time lay on the ground and yell for help. And I'm like, holy smokes. Holy smokes. I told my son, go wait out in the hallway, right? Because I don't want to
Yeah.
disrespect the ladies in front of my son.
Right.
But I'm like, go out in the hallway. And I said, there's no way in the heck I'm telling my kid that, right?
Yeah.
And I had this epiphany at that time. The only male leader or male person in this environment was the janitor. Nothing against that, but there was no male perspective in this conversation. And I think our sons are finding themselves getting a lot of like, this is what you should do from just the female perspective,
Mm-hmm.
which dads, take the work off, go down to the school, be a part of those. Lane.
Can I
Oh,
can I
yeah, please go.
interject real quick
Yes,
on that?
sir. Do it.
So I think that it's okay that we can tell our sons to take up for themselves and to punch the bully in the mouth, right? As long as, and this is something that being intentional as a dad, like I try to tell my son 2 to 3 times, I love you. I'm proud of you
Mm,
for every time that I chew on him, right? For every time that I give him a
mm,
hard time, I want him to know 2 to 3 times more. I'm giving him hugs throughout the day, right? I'm telling him I'm
mm.
proud of him. I'm so proud to be his dad, right? I love him so much, right? As long as we're yeah, man, if the bully messes with you or he messes with your twin sister, I want you to stand up and be that man that protects the innocent and protects the weak, right? Because we need those men in the world, right? But he's got to do it from the right heart, right? He's got to do it
Yes.
from that position of doing the right thing, right? Because man, not that he would ever do this because again, there's been so many instances where my son was taken up for a kid that had Asperger's and things like that.
Mm,
But that would be my worst fear is that my son would be a bully, right? That's
Oh,
to
yeah.
me that's the cowardliest thing in the world, right? And
Mhm.
and again, I don't think his heart would allow him to do that. But yeah, that's what I just want to interject right
Yeah,
there.
no, I think it's powerful, right? Because you're not just like, hey, we're tough guys, but we're
No,
also full of love and grace and kindness. Um,
daily.
Lane, what are two or three things that, and we'll wrap this up here in a moment, but what are two or three things that you want your son to know or believe about himself when he's 25 or 30 and maybe kind of like starting to build his family? What's important for you to go, he's ready to do this?
And that's a tough one. I don't. You read my notes, right? We
Yeah.
went we
Yeah.
went in intentionally, right? I wanted to be an intentional parent in my intentional style, and then like Mike Tyson said, right? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? So
Mm,
that's how fatherhood hit me, and so I still am struggling with that. There's, my son. He told me the other day. He said that you only want the good parts of being a dad, right?
mm,
Man, that hit me, dude, because I'm not the most emotionally available, right? I'm
hmm,
not the most emotionally available. So maybe, I tell him, man, you need to go talk to your mom or somebody else if you got some emotional stuff, right? I tune out, or I get defensive, or I start like, man, I don't see what this kid's got to be upset about, right? He didn't have to go through what I had to go through and all that crap, right?
mm-hmm.
Which is not fair to him, right? So then that's when Rise Up Kings really helped me, because we talked about sitting in the cave, right? If your
Mm-hmm.
brother needs you to sit in the cave with him. So I told my son that, man, use those words, right? That's the safe word, right? Get me to switch outside of myself and say, hey, go sit in the cave with me real quick. And I'll be like, cool, man, I know what's going on, right? So maybe what I would share with him is be quick to forgive, right? It takes a little bit for me once I get upset to get over it. But once I get over it, like, it's gone. Like, I can
Mm-hmm.
walk up and give him a hug and say, bud, I love you. Or my wife gets mad at me for something that I do. And I'll get all pissy for a day, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
take my toys and go home. And then I get over it, and I'm over it. Like, when I'm over it, I'm over it, man. So, something that I would say to him is be intentional with the way that you're going to love your wife and to
Yeah.
love your children. Be intentional about it, and be quick to forget and quick to forgive. Right? Those are
Mm.
very, very important things. You can't hold a grudge, man. And man, I'm guilty. It's just like anybody else. But if I could say that that's that one thing, man, just approach your family with love and forgiveness, and be quick to forgive. Yeah.
I love that. I love the be quick to forgive, right? Forgive and then let it go, because you're holding space for like people to be on this growth trajectory of life, right? This moment, this thing doesn't define them, because you've allowed that to not define you, right? These moments of things that have happened don't define who Lane is today. And in 100 or 1,000 years, those aren't the things that are going to define the French Lane Williams family name, right? The things that's
Right.
going to define that is the forgiveness and the idea that we as men, as humans, as Christians, we are going to grow. Um, Lane, this has been so incredible. I'm sure we could talk for 3 hours with the amount of stories and wisdom that you have from really leaning into life. Is there any last thoughts before I ask my final question? Any last thoughts or anything on your mind that you would want to share with men about you, about your life, about your story before I ask my final question?
Yeah, I mean, just like the 3-minute version. I know that there's guys out there that are listening to this, um, that have been through a lot of the things that I've been through, and when I
Mm-hmm.
say that, I mean, um, sexual abuse, right? I was a victim of sexual abuse for many years. My wife, my mom actually, sold me to grown men for drugs, right? As a kid, this was someone that's supposed to protect me. There was physical abuse, as far as, getting beat up by a second cousin of mine and just getting the crap kicked out of me, right? my grandfather on my mom's side would take a bullwhip and chase me around the house and laugh, and just thought it was the funniest thing in the world for this little kid to be crying and cowering underneath the table, right? So I could go on and on and on with these stories of sexual and physical and emotional abuse, right? But when it took me through my life, and I thought that this was my worth and this is all I was, and I ended up homeless, literally drug addict, homeless, living under a bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
When God says that he's got a plan for you and any of you guys out there listening, right? Man, you don't go from homeless drug addict, locked up in prison, living under a bridge, to being a part of the formation of a multi-million-dollar company, right? Without God being there. I don't have a college degree. I got my GED in a county jail. Okay. So when Vin Diesel said maybe you should pretend like you're talking to somebody that was educated in the penal system, and then maybe just don't pretend. Yeah, that's where I was educated, right?
Yeah.
And when God reaches down and he says, no, I've got something more, right? And I don't know where that is. I don't know where God's taking me, man. I'd love to start speaking more to men's groups and hope, to give hope, right, to some of these guys. But for you guys that are listening, if you've got some of these things that you've dealt with in the past, and you feel God's hand on your heart, man, just listen. Just let God reach in there and soften your heart, and let God direct your feet to where he wants you to be. And it's not it, man, sometimes I'm like, are you freaking kidding me, God? Like, I don't want to do this thing, right? Um, yeah, nothing easy is nothing good is what's the saying? I'm slipping up here, but nothing worth it is easy, right?
Yeah.
God's not
Yeah. It
going to say,
takes.
here's this silver platter, right? He might say, hey, you got some work to do, but this is where I want you to be. Embrace it, man. Embrace the grind.
Yeah, and what's beautiful about it is I think people start to think like, oh, God wants you to earn it. That's not what it is. The
Yeah.
thing is that God wants to allow you to be a part of it, right? Because you and I, if at the end of the day, we're handed a steak dinner and somebody just gave it to us, or we worked our ass off that day to earn it, we're gonna feel good about that steak because we got to play a part in it. And that's our opportunity. Our opportunity is to step into this life with the cards that we're dealt with, right, and make the most of it, not just for ourselves but for those around us. And that's Lane. I mean, to me, bro, the beauty of your story is that you decided to be a good man, but the definition of a good man was a good legacy. But still, it wasn't about you. It was about
Mm-hmm.
who your son was going to be. And I just think how selfless, right? Like how selfless. And 20 years later, or wherever, 25 years later from that point, like you are living that out and you're still on that journey, bro. And dude, kudos to you for getting on here and sharing your story and for getting on stage that day. I know that, part of your story is just going to be you getting to share the past with other men so that it gives them an opportunity to step out of the darkness, and even maybe everything looks good on the outside for them, but to start to open up and be vulnerable and let some of these things that they might be holding in their heart that they think define them, let them out. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing that you're willing to do. And so I applaud you for it.
Real something that I've been embracing lately. It came up in small group and at church, but the the man that Jesus spit on the dirt and put it on his eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said to him, get up and go and wash in the pool of Gethsemane, I think is what it was, right?
Mm.
Well, this blind guy with dirt on his eyes, sand in his eyes, had to get up and walk a half a mile. I'm sure somebody could have given him a bucket.
Yes.
He could have washed his face off in the closest. No. Jesus said, get up and go to the pool of Gethsemane or the fountain of Gethsemane, whatever it was, and wash your eyes over there. So that's where I'm at, right? I'm in that half mile, man. He's rubbed the dirt on my eyes, and I plan to be able to see when I get there. But man, I'm having to do the work, man. I'm having to walk.
What a beautiful analogy, bro. What a beautiful story. Well, with that, Lane, beautiful place to end. Thank you, bro. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for stumbling to that fountain, with all the love and the grace and the forgiveness, and then sharing it with the world around you. I look forward to our paths crossing again. What to say? How incredible. I loved Lane's vulnerability, his openness to share his past, to share where he's come from. It gives us a glimpse into what's possible. I think the moment that really struck me with Lane was when he talked about being in prison at 22 and knowing that he wanted to be a good man, and that part of that meant that he would raise a son. What if you and I were to look at our opportunity as fathers, that it's not just about how do I look and act and feel like a good man here, but what about my son or my grandson or my great-great-grandson? What about my daughters? What about future generations? That part of me being a good man means, what does my family line look like down the road? Incredible. My friends, if you enjoy these conversations, please write a review. Also, please send it to a friend. If you got somebody in mind that's a great dad or could use some inspiration about being a dad, send them a text saying, hey, you're a great dad. I see you. Keep it up and check out this podcast. Thank you to all you dads out there listening to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast. What you do matters tremendously. Don't be like everybody else. Be yourself. That's who your kids, spouse, and community needs. This is your Guide and Ed Shout. Together, let's rebel against the view that fatherhood has little impact and create lives engaged in mastering the craft of fatherhood. I look forward to hanging out with you next time.